الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Let me just do this for the... Oh, it's because I closed... Okay, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, today we continue. Alhamdulillah, this is our fourth week. So everybody that's been with us, it's going to be 1 month of studying Surah Najm. And of course, as we start every week, it's not Surah Najm, but it's a surah near there, Surah Qamar, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. That indeed, we have made the Qur'an easy to memorize, easy to remember. So is there anybody that will take heed? And with that, how has it been? Everybody's been memorizing okay, for the most part? So far, so good. Is it hard, or is it easy? You can be honest. It's challenging, but doable. Alhamdulillah. What about the Arabic? Are we able to remember the Arabic? Yes? I hear yes, okay. And we talked about this a little bit last week, and I just want to remind everybody again, one of the best ways to both improve your salah and improve your, one of the points of doing this in general is recite this in your salah. So, especially even if you're not so good with the ones that we do more recently, at least the ones that we do in the beginning, they should be pretty good by now. Recite it in your salah, and as we recite, think about the stuff that we talk here, and you will find that your salah becomes much more fruitful. And probably the best thing that you can do, and I'm speaking to myself as well, a lot of shuyukh and people that have been doing this their entire lives, they say the sweetest taste of the Qur'an is when you learn it like this, like we're doing, and you recite it at night. So if you can even pray 2 rak'ah at night, if you're already in the habit, then alhamdulillah. And if you're not in the habit, this would be a good time to at least do it and try it. Get up at night a little bit before Fajr, and then instead of reciting Surah Kawthar, Surah Ikhlas, recite Surah Al-Najm, and think what we talk about. And that's one of the best ways to taste the sweetness of the Qur'an. That's how you'll get hooked. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those people. So, this, oh, I see. Okay, so this is our QR code. So for anybody that's joining us for the first time, if you scan this code, then you'll be in our WhatsApp group. And what the WhatsApp group is for is after the session, I'll post the slides inshallah, and then you can also see the slides from the ayat that we've covered previously. So if you haven't already, just scan the QR code, and then you'll be able to join that inshallah. Very quickly as to where we are. This is just a map. We had this last week as well of Surah Al-Najm. The beginning is talking about the Prophet ﷺ, the divine nature of revelation of Qur'an. And once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes the legitimacy of the Prophet, the legitimacy of revelation, and keep in mind, as we always have been saying, that Surah Najm was the first surah that the Prophet ﷺ is reciting in entirety in public. And nobody is stopping him. They're letting him actually recite because they're so mesmerized by it. So first he gets through this, and alhamdulillah, we actually covered these ayat. And then we also covered this, the location of paradise. And now we're right here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after establishing that the Qur'an is authentic, the Prophet is authentic, after pointing out the flaws in their arguments attacking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts poking holes in their belief system, in their way of life. And that's where we are today, and we'll actually go into more of that today. Just another version of the same things. So 1 through 18, we did that, and then we're pretty much here today. So bismillah, so this is from last week. We'll just do a quick review. إِذْ يَغْشَى سِدْرَةَ مَا يَغْشَى. When the low tree was covered by whatever covered it. مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. Anybody remember what that means? مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. His sight, good. So basar is sight. So his sight didn't go left or right, despite him seeing something amazing. We talked about that a little bit. لَقَدْ رَأَى مِنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِ الْكُبْرَى. He saw from the signs of his Lord, one of the great signs of his Lord. And then the conversation shifts. أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى. Compared to this, have you seen Lat and Uzza? And we talked about how these were the two idols. We showed the map, if you remember, of the different, of the significance of the order that they're mentioned. وَمَنَاتَ الثَّالِثَةَ الْأُخْرَى. And Manat, the third one, the other. أَلَكُمُ الذَّكَرُ وَلَهُ الْأُنْثَى. Is for you the sons and for them the daughters, or vice versa. We talked about the significance of this as well. تِلْكَ إِذًا قِسْمَةٌ ضِيزَةٌ. This is verily a bizarre division. And we also talked about this word ضِيزَة, if you weren't with us last week, very quickly, is very interesting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this belief system and calls it bizarre. And in doing so, He uses this word ضِيزَة, which is a very rare word in Arabic. So the word that He uses is a bizarre word to describe a bizarre situation. And of course, this is coming from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who doesn't read, doesn't write, doesn't know poetry, and he's using language in this way. He's using this word ضِيزَة that they're familiar with, but it's still a very rare word. And he's using it just to describe how bizarre their situation is. And today, inshallah, we're going to start from here. In hiya illa asma. So this ayah is a little bit longer than the ones that we've been doing, so we're just going to treat it as different. We're going to break it up when we analyze it, and you should do the same, inshallah, when you're memorizing it. So the first part of it, and we're actually going to break this down further. In hiya illa asma'un sammaytumuha antum wa aba'ukum ma anzala Allahu biha min sultan. So we just finished talking about Lat, Uzza, Manat, these idols, and how devoted they were to these idols, the Quraysh. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these are nothing but names you and your forefathers have invented. Ma anzala Allahu biha min sultan. Allah has sent down no authority whatsoever attached to them. So the first part. We'll do the Arabic first. So remember last week we said if it's green, it means we actually covered it already. So does anybody remember? Good. Negation. Hiya is new, but it's very similar to huwa. Huwa means he, hiya means it. And we talked, huwa means he and hiya means she. And we talked about how in Arabic there's no it, everything has to be a boy or a girl. So hiya in this context is actually it, but it also means she. Illa, except, excellent. La ilaha illallah. Okay, that was green. Asma is a new word for us. That just means names, right? Asma'un sammaytumuha. So this is a combination. It means, the verb means to name. Sammaytum means you named, right? You all named. Sammaytumuha means you all named them. The ha is actually going back to the hiya. So you named. Very literally, it would mean you named her, but it means you named them, because as we said, everything needs a gender. So, in hiya illa asma'un sammaytumuha. These are just names that you named. Antum is a pronoun. It's new for us, but some of you may know it means you all. Okay, anta is singular. It means you, one person. Antum is you all. So who named it? Antum, you all. Wa? And. So what means and? Aba'ukum. Aba'ukum means your forefathers. So this is nothing except names. You named them and your forefathers named them. So this is just something you guys came up with. So going into this, these are just things that your forefathers made up and you're simply following them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the Quraysh. One way to see it is we talked about that name, Uzza. They would give these idols names that would have some name of Allah in there, but it's just morphed. So we talked about Lat, the ta is just changed from a ha. It's from the name of Allah. Uzza is from Izzah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Mu'izz. He's the one with all the Izzah, all the might. And that's where they got that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is Uzza, there's no real Izzah there. There's no real might there. That's just something that you made up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling them out. Another thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is, these are at the end of the day just names. They don't give any benefit. They don't give any harm. It's just a name. So this is in a way degrading to the idols as well. Because if we're talking about somebody, let's say somebody's talking to you about someone, and they say, oh, at the end of the day, he's just a person. He can't do anything to me. He's just a person, right? We almost use it in a degrading way. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, in hiya illa asma, that these idols that you have, you can say all these things, but at the end of the day, it's just a name. It's not really doing anything. And the thing that I want to talk about a little bit is, we talked about last week as well, as this may seem a little bit far removed from us, because alhamdulillah, the concept of idol worship is something very far from us, right? But the Quran is always relevant to us, regardless of what time that we're in. So things that we're devoted to don't always have to take the form of an idol. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling this out, it doesn't have to be that, oh, I don't worship idols, this doesn't apply to me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is, in hiya illa, all of this stuff. All of this is just names and terms. And what I want us to think about is all the different isms that are out there, right? So just put your thing in front of it. Capitalism, socialism, nationalism, all the different isms that are out there. What are they? Every single other way of life that we're taught is the right way to live, right? Socialism, communism, every couple of years, every couple of decades, a new ism comes along and it's broadcasted as the correct way to live. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in hiya illa asma. That's just another name, right? That's just another name. Sammaytumuha antum wa aba'ukum. Whatever ism you come up with, whatever idol you come up with, it's just a name that you came up with. It's just a name that your forefathers came up with. Ma anzala Allahu biha min sultan. So one of the questions comes up that as we said, the surah is being recited. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is up on his pedestal and he's reciting to the Quraysh. They're not the ones that named Lat. They're not the ones that named Uzza, right? Their grandfathers or their fathers, they're the ones that did that. But why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, Antum wa aba'ukum? You did it too. And similar to us, I want us to think in our context, when we're talking about the different isms that we're supposed to accept, capitalism, socialism, whatever it is, we're not the ones that came up with that. I didn't come up with that theory. None of us here are philosophers or economists that came up with that. But why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that? No, you did. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when you accepted it and you followed it without any questioning whatsoever, it's just like you invented it yourself. Right? So when you get this idea that's contrary to what your fitrah goes against, what your fitrah calls you to, when you come to this idea and you don't question it, you just accept it, whether it's an idol or whether it's one of these isms, it's just like you invented it yourself. You're not going to be able to tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh no, my forefather did this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no, antum wa aba'ukum. Even though you didn't literally name it, the fact that you accepted it is just like you named it. You knew that something was baseless, but you followed it anyway. And again, I want us to think about, do we do this? When we hear these things and people just tell us that, yeah, this is a great way of life, this is a great way of being, this is modern, this is what we should accept, do we just accept that? Right? Do we just accept that, yeah, you know, this is right, I'm just going to take it. This is probably a great way of life. Because if we do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is steadily saying that it's just like you invented it too. You have to put it through your filters before you actually accept something as true. And one of the tafasir that I was looking at, it said it's like somebody's complaining that the blind man led me astray. And then the Mufassir, Fakhruddin al-Razi, he says, well, if somebody comes up to me and says a blind man led me astray, you're going to say, no, the blind man, why did you follow the blind man to begin with when you knew he was blind, right? So that's not a valid excuse. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the same thing here, that when you follow them without any rationality on your own part, it's as if you did it yourself. Ma anzal Allahu biha min sultan. That's the next part. So, ma is a negation, we want that. Anzala is to send down. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, same word. In this form, it means He sent down, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, of course, is Allah. Biha, bi, we said, means with, for. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ha is it. So, biha means with it, for it. Min is from. And sultan is a new word, means authority. So again, in this part, there's only two new words, subhanAllah. Anzala and sultan. Everything else you're able to kind of figure out. So all these names, ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. This kind of answers the question, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling out these names. Well, then the question comes up, isn't everything at the end of the day just a name, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, it's going to be like the third or fourth page of the Quran, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, that we taught Adam alayhi salam the names of all things. He uses the same exact word, that he taught Adam alayhi salam the names of all things. But this is what qualifies it. مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِن sultan. When it comes to this thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no authority attached to it. You're just doing what you want. So this is only blameworthy when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself hasn't given it any weight, right? So if we're accepting something as truth, or if we're accepting a certain way of life, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't really come down and hasn't really endorsed it through revelation, that's when it's blameworthy. It's not just completely putting a blanket ban on everything, and we'll talk about this over here a little bit. So that's that part. In hiya illa asma'un sammaytumuha antum wa aba'ukum. So we just talked about Lat and Uzza, the idols, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that all these idols, all these different ways of life, which is probably a little bit more relevant to us, they're just names. There really isn't anything behind this. And sammaytumuha, who did it? Antum wa aba'ukum, you and your forefathers. You're just kind of making this up. إن يتبعون إلا الظن وما تهوى الأنفس إن يتبعون إلا الظن وما تهوى الأنفس. So they are following nothing but conjecture. Dhann means like an assumption, conjecture. وما تهوى الأنفس, and what their own souls desire. That's all they're following. So in again is negation. يتبعون اتبع يتبع means to follow, right? So they all follow is يتبعون. That's the plural form. So they're following. Illa we said is except. Adhan is assumption. Wa we know is end. Wama, what does it mean here? It's not negation. What's the other one? What exactly? And whatever, what? Tahwa, this is interesting. We haven't seen it in this form, but we actually know the world already. Wama yantiqu anil hawa. So hawa, that when he doesn't speak from his desires, if everybody remembers. We did it the first week. So tahwa is from that same root. Tahwa it's a verb form, to desire, right? It literally means she desires, but in this context it would mean it, because as we said, everything needs a gender. So wama tahwa, and what's desiring it? Al-anfus. Al-anfus is souls, right? So in yattabi'una illa dhanna wama tahwa al-anfus, that they're just following their assumptions and whatever their souls desire. First thing to notice here is from the very beginning, وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ, your companion hasn't strayed. وَمَا غَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيُهَا أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى, right? Have you seen Lat and Uzza, right? أَلَكُمُ الذَّكَرُ وَلَهُ الْأُنْثَى is for you. So it's always you, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking directly to Quraysh. So the Prophet ﷺ is up on this, in this marketplace, wherever he is, and he's reciting this surah, and everything is you people this, you people that. So they're feeling like he's talking directly to them. Whether it's Quraysh, the leaders, the other people, it's directed directly at them. Here, the first time in the surah, it says, إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ, right? يَتَّبِعُونَ means they follow. If we're going to follow what was happening before, it should be تَتَّبِعُونَ, which would mean you follow. But Allah says, إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, they follow. So the tense here changes from second person to third person, okay? It's a very common thing that happens in the Quran, but pay attention to when that happens, because there's, of course, everything in the Quran has meaning. So why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the first time in the surah now, he starts speaking about them in the third person? One is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now, after demonstrating how foolish they are, he's turning away from them. Like, if you're so mad at somebody, I can't even speak to you right now. And of course, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثُلُ الْأَعْلَى, Allah has the greatest example. But I can't even talk to you, I'm going to talk about you to the person next to you. That's one. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, I'm not going to even address these people anymore. And in doing so, who else is he talking to now? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in a subtle way, he's telling the Prophet that I'm turning away from them. I'm talking to you now. And whatever they're saying about you, that you're crazy, you're majnoon, you're a poet, you turn away from them too. Don't turn away, you turn away from what they're saying rather. That you don't need to concern yourself with that. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, all they're basing this on is just their assumptions, right? And another way to kind of take this is now it becomes more general. Up until now, we're talking about Quraysh, very specific, Lat, Uzza. We can extrapolate other ideas from that as we've done, but this is still very much talking to Quraysh. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying them as in anybody else, any other way of life. Now we're not limiting the discussion to just Quraysh and Lat and Uzza and Manat, no. Any other way of life, إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, they're following nothing but their assumptions. So what is this dhann and وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسِ? That it's not, as we said, it's just سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَأَبَاؤُكُمْ, that these are just names that you and your forefathers made up. It's not based on revelation, not from a prophet, as compared to what? As compared to this. As compared to this Quran. This is actually based in something. Whatever you're following is not based on anything at all. Imagine you're in that marketplace listening to this for the first time, and then we wonder, why is it that they didn't stop the Prophet? Because how can you stop this? Somebody's coming at you like this. You wouldn't even be able to stop the train of thought. Like, what is he saying right now? I've never heard this before, subhanAllah. To break this down a little bit, another thing is, إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the present tense here. In Arabic, the present tense and the future tense are used, is the same, right? So يَتَّبِعُونَ can mean they follow. It can also mean that they will follow. So there's essentially two ways of saying something. One is past tense and one is present tense, but present and future can be used the same way, and the context you use to figure it out. But in any case, the significance of going, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say that they followed their desires. He says that they follow their desires, right? Something important to know is in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often talks about the day of judgment in the past tense. Right? In Surah Ma'idah, he discusses a discussion with Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam that's going to happen on the day of judgment. And he says, وَإِذْ قَالَ Isa. When Isa said, even though that's a conversation that's going to happen in the future. So whenever in the Quran Allah wants to demonstrate certainty, because the past is certain. Whatever I did, I can't go back and change that. So there's certainty there. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to describe something certain, He uses the past tense. Most of the time, that's one way to use it. The future tense and the present tense, there's always some ambiguity to it. I can tell you I'm going to do something tomorrow, do something next week, but there's always that if. What if I don't? What if I don't show up? What if I don't stick to my word? There's always that room to change. And that's one of the reasons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the present tense here. Because in following their desires, even that might change. They're not even fully devoted to what they believe in. These idols that they're so, devoted to, the idol might break today and they'll find another one tomorrow. Right? The isms and everything that in our context that we believe everybody tells us is right, in 20, 30 years, it might fail completely and they might throw another one on us and say, no, now it's this one that's right. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ. The certainty doesn't even exist in what they believe in. They don't even believe in this in themselves. They might just change it tomorrow, right? And the other thing comes up that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they're just following their assumptions. But in Islam, we're actually taught to make educated guesses when we can't figure something out. That's the whole field of ijtihad and fiqh, is to make educated guesses. So how do you reconcile that? But that's only in the absence of solid proof. And there's a reason we bring this up. So you only make an educated guess when there's an absence of solid proof. So if somebody comes and tells you, you only have to pray 3 times a day because I did my calculations and that's what I came up with, you're going to say no, because there's solid proof that it's 5 times a day. Very simple example, right? Only when there's room for different interpretations is when you go through that process of gathering the evidence and getting to an endpoint. But what this kind of implies is there is solid proof. Does that make sense? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in this case, you can't follow an educated guess because solid proof is here. When it comes to the Quran, when it comes to a way of life, you can't follow another ism and another way of life because solid proof is already here for this. There's no excuse. So the question goes, do we realize that the solid proof exists for us? Do we look at the Quran, do we look at the Prophet ﷺ, and do we see that as solid, undeniable proof? That I can't follow my assumptions on another way of life because there's no denying this. There's no denying this book. There's no denying that a man can't just come up with this, what we've been discussing for the past month. And if we don't, then we need to figure out why and get there. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ. And again, that's another thing that's used in the present future tense. Another important thing here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says both dhann, their assumptions, وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ, their desires. He describes both. So when it comes to what they believe in, the way of life they choose for themselves, that's dhann. It's based on conjecture. It's just based on what they heard. When it comes to their actions, وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ, it's what they desire. So the belief is based on dhann, on assumption, but the action is based on وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ, what they desire. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in very few words is describing their entire belief system. That this is just something you came up with. There's no basis for it. Whatever you believe is just conjecture, and whatever you actually put into action is something that you wanted to do anyway. So you know what you desire, what your soul desires, and you find a way to do it. And that is supposed to be, and I say it's supposed to be because that's when it comes a time for us to reflect on this, is are we any different? When our desires go against what we know to be the truth, whether in any scenario, are we just going to follow our desires, or are we actually going to submit to the truth? Because that's the difference between being Muslim and the difference between being what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing here. So that's, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of the people that actually are able to go with the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends this ayah, this large ayah, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى, while guidance from their Lord has surely reached them. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. وَلَقَدْ we discussed in another place, it's and certainly. But I actually put a times 2 there because wa means and, we know that. La is lam al-tawqid here is the lam of emphasis, and qad is also emphasis, right? So qad aflaha man tazakka, surely those that purified themselves have succeeded. So that's qad, there's no la there. But sometimes Allah says laqad. So laqad is actually, if you want to be literal about it, it would be and certainly ja'ahum min rabbihim al-huda. But of course, to translate that just sounds weird, so translations will leave that out. But there's 2 levels of emphasis here to kind of really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is driving this point home for us. Ja'a means to come, and in this form it means he came, right? إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, when the help of Allah comes and the victory, إِذَا جَاءَ, right? وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ, and then when you add the hum to it, hum is a pronoun, it means they, or in this case them. So جَاءَهum becomes and came to them. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ, and certainly came to them, from. Excellent. Mir Rabbihim. So Rabbi is of course Rabb, and then him again, same thing as Ja'ahum, you add the pronoun to it, so it becomes their Lord. Al-Huda, we don't have it here, but I'm sure everybody already knows what it means, guidance, right? So, and indeed, certainly guidance has come to them. And we have to remember it in the context of the bigger ayah. We just talked about these are nothing but names, they're just following their desires. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. So the certainty is there. So we just talked about you can't follow your assumptions when the certainty is there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is driving home here that no, they're doing this, but the certainty is there with them. This statement, and it's okay if you don't follow this completely, but I just thought I'd keep it in here. In Arabic grammar, there's a type of statement called a hal, right? So hal, it's even a word in Urdu, I believe. It means your state, right? So in Arabic, this is a certain thing in grammar that can be used to show the state of something, right? So if you're running, how are you running? Fast, slow? That can be a hal. It's almost like an adverb, not exactly, but that's kind of what it is. That's actually what this sentence is. This whole sentence is a hal. So it's not saying necessarily that guidance came to them once. It's saying وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. This is literally their state. So while this conversation is happening, they're following their desires, they're following Lat and Uzza and their idols and all these other ways of life. While this is happening, this entire time, they're in a state of وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. So because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing this, and if later on if somebody reads this, they might think that maybe these people didn't have anything else to go off of. Or even in our case, maybe we're following all these isms because we don't have anything else to go off of. Maybe this is the best that we could do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. They followed all these things, they followed all these other way of life, but at the same time, they had that certain مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. From their Lord, guidance came to them, but they still went the other way. What is this guidance? Of course, the Quran, this book that we're reading, right? This book that the Prophet ﷺ is literally reciting to them in that context, that this came to you and you're still following something else. This came to us, are we still desiring something else? The Prophet ﷺ, the miracles that he brought, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. There's no doubt in this. This had already come to them. And then أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. And subhanAllah, when I was going through this, if the next 2 ayahs is all we did for this entire thing, it would be enough. And it's one of the reasons I chose Surah Najm for this, is because there's so many ayahs like this. And this is, at least for me personally, the first instance of that. أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. Or is man just going to have everything he wishes for? أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. Is another way to say or. I know we said aw before, aw adna, but is another way to say or. Li, we did it. Does anybody know what that attachment? For, excellent. For, right? So when you, insan, everybody knows, I'm sure, is mankind, man. So lil insan means for man. Lil insani, or is for man. Ma, we know, means what or whatever. Tamanna means to wish for. Or is mankind, or is man just going to get whatever he wishes for, right? Are you just going to get everything you wish for? And the thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is getting to here is our false security, our hope that we're in such good standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we feel that we're in a certain place with Allah despite our actions being completely separate. That these mushrikun of Quraysh and these people that follow their other ways of life, nobody, you see at the horrors going on around the world today, These people don't believe that they'll ever be judged for any of this. They believe that they're in the right? But is that actually something based on anything, or just something that they wish? I can go and become a tyrant of a leader, and I just keep continuing doing that because deep down, I don't think I'm ever going to be accountable for that. So I'm thinking whatever I wish for is going to happen. I can be terrible to my family, terrible in my business, not do anything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but in my head I'm thinking I'll be okay. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling out that entire mindset. أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. That do you really think you're just going to get whatever you wish? Right? In another place in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights these thoughts. He says in Surah Fussilat, وَلَئِذْ رُجِعْتُ إِلَىٰ رَبِّي إِنَّ لِي عِنْدَهُ لِلْحُسْنَى. This is one of the leaders of the Quraysh. He says, look how rich I am here. And we may not say this in these words, but sometimes we may think like this, like, look how rich I am here. وَلَئِذْ رُجِعْتُ إِلَىٰ رَبِّي. Even if I go back to my Lord, you see how good He has kept me here, I'm going to be just as good there. Right? And many of us may know in Surah Al-Kahf, وَلَئِذْ رُدِيتُ إِلَىٰ رَبِّي لَأَجِدَنَّ خَيْرًا مِنْهَا مُنْقَلَبًا. That if I ever go back to my Lord, look how He's taking care of me here, I'll be good over there. Right? Sometimes the most terrible people in the world are enjoying the most lavish lives. And if they really thought that they would be accountable for it, they wouldn't do that. But part of them actually thinks this, that I'm doing so good here that I'll be fine. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking, أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. That do you really think that? That do you really think you'll be good? Nothing's going to happen to you, right? Another place, لَأُوتَيَنَّ مَالَ وَوَلَدَ. I have so much money, I have so much children, I'll be good. And the root of it is that there's going to be no reckoning, no judgment. I can do whatever I want, and I'm never going to be answerable for it. That's what I know, that's what I think, but in reality, it's actually what I wish for. That's what I'm hoping. It's not that I know that there's no judgment, I hope there's no judgment, because if there is, then I'm done. That's what they're hoping for. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking, أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. Are you just going to get whatever you want? Are you just going to get your way? Last ayah for this week, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends that. He answers that question. SubhanAllah, He doesn't answer it by saying that, no, you're not going to get what you wish for. He says, فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. The akhirah and the ula, the first life and the next, belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The answer to the question isn't, no, you're not going to get what you wish. The answer to the question is, فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. Let's do the Arabic really quickly and then we'll break it down. Fa means, what? So while. Li we just did. Fali means for, and then فَلِلَّهِ, so, with Allah, for Allah. Al-akhirah, we know, the hereafter. Wa is and ula is a new word, it means the first. So, akhirah is the next life, ula is the first life, this dunya. Both are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. Are you going to get just whatever you wish for? فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. But both the akhirah and the ula belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives whatever He wants in both places. You're not just going to get what you wish for. Even if you are getting some of what you're wishing for here, it's not a result of your effort, it's because فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns the dunya and He gives it to whoever He wills. Right? But the important thing, the interesting thing is here, is what comes first, the dunya or the akhirah? The dunya. But in the ayah, what does Allah mention first? Al-akhirah, right? Because in the dunya, you may not necessarily be held accountable. Right? And that's where these people fall into. They think, أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. I'm going to get whatever I wish for. I'm not being held accountable. لَأُوتَيَنَّ مَالًا وَوَلَدًا. I have so much wealth, I have so many children. I'm doing so great here. And Allah puts the akhirah here. He breaks the normal order. فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ. Well, even if you're not accountable here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also owns the akhirah. So even if you're not accountable in the dunya and you think you're going to get away with it, فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns the akhirah and He will hold us accountable. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. That's it for today. We'll go very quickly through it again. إِنْ هِيَ إِلَّا أَسْمَاءٌ سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ. That these are just names that you and your forefathers named. مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't sent any authority for any of this. إِنْ يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ. They only follow nothing except assumptions and their conjecture. وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسِ. And whatever their souls desire. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. While this entire time, a clear guidance from their Lord has come to them. And then أَمْ لِلْإِنسَانِ مَا تَمَنَّى. Does mankind really think that he's just going to get whatever he wishes for? فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. When with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the akhirah and ula, and the first life, the dunya. These are our sources as always, these 5 tafasir if you want to look into it more. And that is end of today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.